Hey everybody. Okay, this is part two of part two. My live got cut off. I'm having some kind of issues with my internet connection, and so it's a little unstable. So I thought that I would just film this video separately on my computer, and then I'll post it later. So I think where we left it was under option two. We were talking about choosing a word or phrase not related to your business. The next option would be option three, and that is to use a word or phrase that is suggestive um, and yet unique. I actually really love suggestive trademarks when they're done right, because they can, in a really subtle way, communicate what you offer without being descriptive. And if you make something up, then the chances that the URL is available are really good, and the chances of getting trademark registration are really good. So some examples, and I'll post the slides below the video, but Nike is a great one. Nike is suggestive in that Nike's I think the goddess of victory. And or yeah, something like that. And so that relates to sports. I think it's a really cool word to use for a brand. Certainly very unique at the time. Really strong brand. Wrangler is another one that I think is a really great brand. And obviously it describes their ideal client or customer, right? It's a wrangler, somebody who wrangles cows and cowboys and cowgirls. So that's really a great name. I think using your ideal customer as inspiration for your brand name is a really clever idea. And I've got another example of that in a minute. Timex is actually a really good example. Timex, obviously, the brand has something to do with time, telling time. It's not necessarily completely obvious that it's a watch company. And I think they're bigger than just watches these days, but I think that's a really strong brand. And obviously it's a made up word. So that is a great choice. And then I love Stitch Fix. I think the ladies may be more familiar with that brand than men, but it is a subscription box service for clothing. I think they do send men's clothes too, but I feel like it's mostly women that I know of that have subscribed to them. But I think it's a really clever name, Stitch, relating to the stitches and in the clothing, and then Fix, which is a really cute play on getting your fix of new clothes. Frequently. It's a great. I just love everything about it. I think it really communicates the company's vibe and what it is without being descriptive. So those are really strong examples of using suggestive words, and Netflix being another really good example. So that is something to play with. And like Nike is not a made up word, that's an actual Greek figure. Wrangler, I think that wasn't a made up word before the brand launched. I think that's what you would call somebody that's working as a cowboy. Maybe they coined the phrase, though. I'm not really sure. Timex is definitely made up. And Stitch Fix is not made up, but it's two words that are seemingly unrelated put together, which makes it very unique. So these are all really strong, and I think they should give you some inspiration about some ideas that you could come up with. So those first three options I feel like are really the strongest, but I do have a couple of others that, if you're in a pinch or a certain type of entrepreneur or founder, these might really work for you. So option four would be using your given name. Now, this is particularly good if you are a designer, an author, a thought leader, speaker, that kind of thing. Using your whole name as your brand can be very effective. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get trademark registration in it right away, though. And you can't use just your last name. If you use just your last name, you risk getting a refusal from the USPTO based on it being descriptive, actually. So a last name is a mere surname. It's descriptive, and mainly they don't want to prevent anyone else that has that same last name from using their last name in business, and so they're not going to grant registration generally in something that's clearly a last name or thought of primarily as a last name. But you can use your whole name. And then, sometimes it takes time to gain brand recognition. Like Oprah Winfrey, when she first started, had no name recognition. Now her first name is a brand that stands apart from her as the individual, very, very strong brand. But it took a number of years for it to sort of achieve that status. So I think this is a great way to go. But if you are launching on a platform like Amazon, where you want to be applying to brand registry, this is not the way to go. I think it would take a long time to potentially get trademark registration. And for brand registry, you have to have trademark registration in order to keep your brand registry account. You can apply for brand registry with a pending trademark application, but if it gets rejected by the USPTO, Amazon will potentially shut your brand registry account down. So you don't want to mess around with brand names that you can't own. So I would not mess with this type of name if you're doing an Amazon-based business, but it can be very effective for certain types of entrepreneurs. The other option would be to use a fictional proper name. And that is kind of a fun way to go, as long as it's not obviously somebody else's name. So Tommy Bahama is the strongest example I can think of for this. Obviously, that's not a real person's name, but the company has used the avatar of this person, Tommy Bahama, to sort of inspire all of their decisions about their brand and marketing. And Tommy Bahama is really an avatar for their ideal customer. So that's a fun thing, is you could come up with who is your brand avatar, and then give that person a name, and make sure it's a name that's obviously not a real person's name. Like Tommy Bahama, obviously not a real person's name. So I think that can be really effective. J. Crew's another example of a strong name that's not an actual person. So is Betty Crocker. Now, there are some brands like Jimmy Choo, that Jimmy Choo is an actual person who launched the company, but ultimately it's not Jimmy Choo that owns the company anymore. And so if you use someone else's name, you would have to get consent from that person in order to use their name. So there's some other hoops you have to jump through. So I would just be really careful using names in general, unless, again, of course, you need to have a good trademark lawyer advising you in order to make these decisions. So those are just some ideas. Hopefully I've given you some inspiration for you to kind of go back to the drawing board. But the one bit of information I would give you is, do not try to do this alone. You really need an experienced trademark lawyer advising you along the way. Because if you go to the USPTO and do a search, you may do a search for the exact name you want, and maybe you won't find a trademark registration or filing under that name. And so you might think, oh, well, it's available. Awesome. That's not the end of the inquiry. That's a great place to start for obvious red flags. But just because you didn't find it on the USPTO doesn't mean that there isn't a mark that already exists that yours might end up being confusingly similar to. You really need the expertise of a good lawyer to assess the other existing marks and use their paid databases that you would not have access to. You wouldn't pay the money for these really expensive databases to do one or two searches. And I will also say that companies like LegalZoom, Rocket Matter, and such, they say they're doing a search for you. They're literally they cannot advise you. They cannot give you legal advice. It's actually illegal for them to do it. And so if you look at their terms of use, it's very obvious that they're not advising you. So it frustrates me because I feel like they make you feel like you're getting guidance, but you're not. So that is a complete waste of money. You're not really getting any value for that at all. You'd be better off to try to do the search by yourself. But again, I would never recommend that. I have way too many people come to me every single week needing me to fix problems that they created by trying to do this trademark process by themselves. So definitely the best advice I can give you is start brainstorming based on these options I've given you, but call a good trademark lawyer who's really versed on the research side. This is something I love to do, is be involved as early in the process as possible. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to pick a name that you like, do a quick search on the USPTO, sort of minimize the importance of this, go ahead and launch, sign up for, your selling account, This is particularly true for Amazon sellers, but this really applies to everyone. And then rush down the road to get your logo and get your signage and your packaging, and maybe you're actually even going to put the brand name on your products, either in the form of labels or hang tags or like embossed or engraved or stamped on the product itself. Um, and then if you find out later that the mark is one you can't own, you are out all of those costs. All of the inventory has to be destroyed. You can't use it. If you're infringing on somebody else's mark, you cannot sell those products, because the person who has the rights in that name can come after you and force you to hand over profits from your sales. So it is a huge mistake to not involve a good trademark lawyer early in the process. Do not go spend a bunch of money on the rest of your business before you get this figured out. It could be catastrophic, because I know that when you're launching a business, most of us have a very limited budget. And so you don't want to do something that's actually going, the cost of doing a trademark with a good trademark lawyer is going to cost you, $1,100, $1,200, $1,500. And then filing fees with the USPTO, which I know doesn't sound, it sounds like a lot of money for some people, but if you end up in a dispute, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, not just to protect your or defend yourself, but think of how much you put into the inventory that then you can't use. You're potentially talking tens of thousands of dollars there as well. So it is much smarter to spend the money to get a good trademark lawyer on your side, advising you from the very beginning, than to risk those types of problems on the back end. And I'm telling you, this is not a rare occurrence. Every single week, I have clients come to me who've already invested in branded inventory, and I have to deliver the bad news that they have to rebrand or they're going to get sued. Or they're not going to get registration. And as I mentioned before, if you don't actually succeed in getting registration with the USPTO, places like Amazon, if you're selling on a marketplace like that, Etsy's cracking down on this, Walmart's cracking down on this. They will shut your account down. You'll lose all of your, all of the algorithm rankings, all of your reviews. It's a really, really big problem. So don't mess around with this, okay? So let me know if you have any questions, and if anybody wants to talk about their specific situation. I'm leaving information in the description of this video for how to contact me for a free consult. And anyways, I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you guys on the next live. Bye.